Today I want to talk about how to do research, academic research. I really want you to spend less time doing research and reading difficult journal articles. And so I put together this presentation on how to do academic research. The big issue here is that in high school we learn how to write a 5-paragraph essay, and that's great. However, in the real world we don't typically write 5-paragraph essays, and when we do write, it's typically to meet a specific need. So it's to answer a prompt or to promote a product or something like that. The big issue in academia is the research process just takes too long and we're not very good at it. And part of this is it's my fault. It's us that are teaching you. We're not teaching you enough about how to do good research. And so I wanted to try to make some amends for that today and share with you some of the tips and tricks that I've picked up over the last few decades. Now, I want to start by sharing a story with you. All right, so here's the story. When I was in graduate school, I had this professor that students just dreaded taking his class, but I had to graduate. So I got in there, and on the first week of class, he said, okay, you're going to read a lot in this class. And I quickly learned that read a lot was an understatement. He would assign like 10 articles a week. Each article was like 20 to 30 pages. So we were looking at 200 to 300 pages, or the equivalent of a book each week. And if it was just reading a book, I can do that. I read a book every week anyways. But these were really dense journal articles that I just didn't understand what they were saying. To read a page of a book might take a minute. To read a page of a journal article might take an hour. And so it was just taking me forever. And to make it worse, this professor, if you didn't know what you were talking about, if you came to class less prepared than he was, he would belittle you in front of your classmates. And I just I had major anxiety about going to this class. And so I tried to do my best, and I read, and I did everything I could, and I made notes, and I would look up vocabulary words, and I would do everything I can. But it wasn't very helpful. So fortunately, I learned that there were a lot of things that I could have done to save a lot of time and embarrassment by just improving the research process. And what I mean by that is when you read a journal article, typically for a 30-page article, you don't need to read 30 pages. You need to read maybe half a page to understand what the article's about so that you can talk about that and be knowledgeable about that topic. If you're doing research, if you're doing like a research paper like I'm assigning to this class, often you don't even need to read that much. You're simply skimming through what a bunch of articles are and looking at their abstracts to determine whether or not you want to dig deeper into that article to find research that will validate a point that you're trying to make or identify a theme. And so there's a lot that we can do to save time and energy so you don't get stressed out. So here is my first video. This one talks about doing practical research, and I hope it works. We'll see. Right, hey students. So I wanted to give you a real-life example of how to do research to learn more about a topic so that you can write about that topic. So in our class, we're going to be writing a purpose paper about the purpose of schooling and society. And a lot of it's going to be your opinion, but you're going to do some research to back up your opinion. Now, I was thinking about that this morning because I actually was assigned a writing assignment of my own early this morning. So at like 4 o'clock this morning, I woke up and I had to do research, and let me just show you kind of what I did. So as you might know, I do some sports writing on the side for BYU Insider and ESPN 960, where I cover football recruits. And when they commit to their school, I'll often interview them and publish my findings. And so it's researching a topic, in this case a person, and finding statistics and finding data to back up things and develop my own ideas. And before we even get into the research, it's really important to note that anytime you write an article, it's important that you make it different from what ChatGPT would do or a classmate or anyone else. You want your unique voice in your article, and you do that by doing the research, by learning a lot about the topic, and then developing themes and trends and identifying those things and then putting those together in your own words. Well, it's no different when I write an article. So last night there was a commitment from a kid named Drew There we go, Cowart. I couldn't remember. But you'll notice I'm seeing, even as I pull that up, it's giving me some suggestions. So I'm going to start by just looking to see what other people have done in their research about Drew Cowart. So I'm going to just start opening things in other tabs to see what has been written. I'll open his Twitter account. And I'm just finding cool stuff here about him. Now, the nice thing is now I can go through and just learn, all right, 2-star athlete, he's committed to BYU now, had an offer to Middle Tennessee State, and also offers to Yale, Utah, and San Jose. Now, because I'm an expert in this area, I can already, based on the data, have a few assumptions about who this kind of person is, and if he has an offer to Yale, he probably gets really good grades. If he has been looked at by Utah and BYU, he probably has a connection to Utah in some way. But then San Jose and Middle Tennessee State, those are more interesting because those are kind of out there. So I'd want to do some research and see if those pop up. But the other information, not heavily recruited, so this is probably a preferred walk-on offer. And I can read about other things. He did get a Middle Tennessee offer last year or 2 years ago. All right. So then I can actually read articles that have already covered, so I'm not breaking this story. So I can read about him, and I see, oh, yeah, it talks about the value of being a walk-on. So indeed, he's a preferred walk-on, and looks like his dad's a former BYU player, so we'd call that a legacy player. He's coached by Ty Detmer and Max Hall, so I already knew that because he goes to ALA. I can look at his Twitter account and see what he's doing. So he just announced his commitment. Oh, and here's the article I wrote, so we'll come back to that at the end to show you what I did. And then Middle Tennessee State is his offer, and then we can watch his highlights. So I'll start just by putting down all the information I have, and you'll notice what I found here, these are primary sources. They have data, and if I'm going to cite them, then I'll cite them as primary sources. Now, in a web article, you just link to those. In an academic article, you'd actually list the authors, and then in your references, put where it goes to. And so it just depends on your medium. But for this exercise, just in showing you how I do research, I wanted to kind of just show you how I come up with different things. Now, you'll notice that as I collected my data, I started noticing things. He goes to ALA in Queen Creek, Arizona, so I know that that's a charter school. So I could, in my article, I could write a little bit about what it means to come from a smaller school, be under-recruited. SUU actually has a backup quarterback that went to the same school. And so I know a little bit about his situation and how he came here to our school. And so that gives me some context. Now, I also noted that his coaches in high school are former BYU quarterbacks, so I'll want to say something about that in the article. And I'll probably want to say something about his dad being a former defensive lineman. So those are things that are really interesting, and I can write an article around those things, and then my article will be unique. Now, you saw that some of those things were mentioned here, so if I really want to make it my own, I need to look at other ways. Love the advertisements there. Want to find other ways to make this my own. And so what I do is I reach out to the actual player and I interview him. And so I can ask him any questions I want. I already have some basic information. So I went ahead and interviewed him and asked him some questions, and then hurried and wrote up the article. So if I click on this, you can see this article that I did this morning, New Commit, Connects Generations of BYU Quarterbacks. I talk about how his coaches are former BYU guys, that he committed to play for BYU. I go through some of his stats and see here I'm linking to the primary sources. And then I went ahead and interviewed him, and I just put the Q&A here. So it wasn't a lot of extra work to do that, but I was able to make this uniquely mine. And the reason why we're talking about this when it comes to writing a research article is the goal isn't how long or how short, and if you did all the criteria, what makes a paper a good paper is it adds a new spin on things. It makes you think about things in a new and a different way, or it validates your opinion on something. So for this purpose paper, you might have to go through even some secondary. So if I went to, for example, wikipedia.org, this would be a good place. Say I wanted to find some more information about his coaches, so I type in Coach Detmer, and I can research him and find some information here. Now this is a secondary source, so Wikipedia is a really great tool for learning about a topic, and then it will direct you to the primary sources. So when I come down here to the footnotes, it will direct me to primary sources, and then I will cite those in my article. So I'm not typically going to cite Wikipedia, I'm going to cite the primary sources. However, in web articles, you can get away with citing whatever you want. You just link to it, and then people can follow the trail that way. In an academic article, you want to be a little more formal, and so you're going to link to primary sources. Anyhow, that's kind of, I just wanted to take you through the process. Obviously, in the real world, we do research and we put together our findings just like you are doing for this homework assignment. And so I wanted to show you a real example of how I do research and put those things together. So I hope this was helpful for you. Thanks. Bye. All right, I'm back. So let's go to the next slide. All right, so step one for you in this research assignment is to take your assignment description or topic prompt and create a list of search topics using Google Auto Suggest. This is something that obviously I didn't have 20 years ago when I was in school, but Auto Suggest in Google is really awesome for brainstorming and for coming up with topics. I use this when I'm creating YouTube videos or thinking about a podcast episode that I'm creating. I use it in writing articles and generating topic ideas. And so I'm gonna show you another video, and it's gonna walk you through how to use Google Auto Suggest to come up with a starting point for the article that you're writing. Bloop, 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 bloop.
Okay, so if we're here in Google, we want to type in our search topic. So the purpose of schools and society. Now we're going to look at the auto suggest feature here, and if we're not getting many suggestions, we can change our prompt, or we can even just take a few words out. So the purpose of schools in America, in education, in the United States, in the classroom. So we can do that. Purpose of schools in preventing childhood obesity. Function of schools. So maybe I'm going to switch over here to function of schools, and then again click on it to see what else comes up. Function of school and community, school and education, etc. So I'm going to use this to now generate a list of a bunch of potential search terms. And the reason I need this is I'm going to use this actually in Google Scholar, which we'll talk about in a minute. But just generating a list right now can be really helpful.
All right, so here we're looking at your next assignment, and it's writing a purpose paper about the purpose or purposes of public schooling and society. Now, of course, this paper will be up in the assignments tab on Canvas, and you can look up the step-by-step instructions on how to do it. But right now, I'm just helping you generate, this is the brainstorm part of coming up with your topic and starting to develop your own ideas. So we're looking at what roles do schools serve, what roles should they serve, and we want you to push your thinking on why do we have schools. Now, as I use the auto suggest, I started seeing things like roles of schools, why we have school, purpose of schools. So I'm just coming up with this list of different search topics. And this is important because I'm going to move from Google to Google Scholar. And Google Scholar is going to give me a way of finding primary sources on research that has been done on the purpose of schooling. So this is better than, obviously, if I just want to learn for myself, then I'm just going to Google it, and I'm going to read blog articles and magazine and newspaper articles on the purposes of schools. And that's really helpful. In fact, that's what I did for this class in coming up with the curriculum on what I wanted to teach you. And over the next few weeks, we're going to talk about the achievement gap. We're going to talk about social skills. We're going to talk about different issues that are happening in schools that will illuminate some of the things that we're doing in schools. And so you'll see that in the readings. So that process is really important. However, for a more formal paper, you want to look at some primary sources that are based in research. So anytime you're going to share your opinion, if you can back that up with research and data, that's going to pull more weight to your opinion. So that's really important. So now let me show you how to get started with Google Scholar. This is a tool that I know some of you have used, but a lot of you haven't. And this will save you so much time in the research process and yield better results. So I have another video for you. Let's move on over to it.
All right, now to find Google Scholar, we can just Google it and just type in Google Scholar, or you can go to scholar.google.com. But either way, it's going to take you to this. Now, Google Scholar is a really cool tool because this is something that the university pays to have a subscription into. So when we click on this, this is going to give us a Google search tab, but for academic and vetted articles. Now, the reason why Google Scholar is superior to just normal Google when you're doing academic research is it's not going to pull up everybody's blogs and magazine articles and newspaper articles and things like that. It's going to pull up journal articles that have been peer-reviewed and are more legitimate sources. So while Wikipedia and blogs are really helpful as secondary sources that will direct you to primary sources, if you want to find actual primary sources, you want to be here in Google Scholar. Now, before you can use Google Scholar, you have to sign in, and this is really important. You're going to sign in using your university email because that will connect you to Google Scholar. So let me do that really quick. So now I'm logged in, and I know because it has my university profile up here in the upper right. And that's, again, really important. Now, once we're in Google Scholar, we can take those prompts for whatever we're researching and start plugging them in. So before, I had the prompt that I came up with of purpose of schools. So I'm just going to type in purpose of schools, hit enter. Now you'll notice a few things. We've got 3 columns here. We've got a left column that has to do with filtering our results. We've got the actual results in the center, and we're going to talk about the different parts of this. And then on the right, we have access to the actual source, so PDFs or sometimes HTML documents. So first, let's look at our filters. Sometimes it's really helpful to use even older years. So if I'm looking at the purpose of schools in America, maybe something that's interesting to me is how has it changed over the last 50 years? So if I go back to, let's say, 1970 to 1980, I can click in custom range and go 1970 to 1980. And now I'm going to search for results that were published during that period of time. So all of these results are during that time period. So what schools are for, and we've got a document. So let's look at some of these to see what kind of results we have. Now first I want you to notice here in the main column in the middle, it's going to tell us the name of the article or book chapter or book. Then it's going to tell us the author, or at least the primary author, and where it is cited. It'll give you a little bit of an explanation of what your article is, and then you can save these citations if you're doing a bunch of research and then want to have them all grouped together. That can be really helpful. This citation button is phenomenal. We're going to go over that in just a minute. But right now I want you to pay attention to this, cited by 578. That means a lot of people have used this reference in their research, which means it's commonly accepted. And so the higher this number, typically the better the citation. Now that's not always the case, especially with new articles. But if I'm looking at something really old, I'm probably going to defer to something like this over something that only has 70 citations. And I say only 70, but that's actually really great too. Then you can look for related articles. So if you find something that's perfect for what you're researching, click on the related articles, and it's going to find some of those that have cited this article. It will list those for you. And then if there are multiple versions, typically that just means different organizations uploaded the same thing. So that usually doesn't matter very much. Now, if I want to actually look at this article, I'm going to come over here and just right-click to open it in a new tab. And we can come over and see the actual document. Of course, this is old, so it looks like it's old. As we scroll through, it looks like this is an entire book. So no wonder so many people have cited it. This was a 5-6 chapter book on this topic. So, you have free access, I guess paid with your tuition, to this 6 chapter book. And you can read it if you want. I am doing research, and so I'm not going to read this whole book. I'm going to look for all of my sources first because I'm here in the research stage. So let's look at some of these and see if they're really helpful. Bringing the boss back, employer size, no. Criteria for an ethnographic approach, no, that's about how to research schools. Organize teachers in American schools, that might be interesting. Let's see, the purpose of this study is to identify trends in teacher collective bargaining on items other than, probably not as good. Effective schools, here, this could be useful. What are effective schools for the urban poor? So let's open that up and see if we get a good resource here. Sorry, it's taking a second. All right, so it looks like this is a journal article from October 79. And journal articles are easy to read in their entirety. They're written to be easy to digest and easy to read. But what I'm going to look through first is simply the headers. The Brookover and Leselet study, the Search for Effective Schools project, basic skills, etc. And then what I really want to focus on is the summary. I want to end this discussion by noting unequivocally, as I can see, to me is the most tangible and indispensable characteristics. So this is what matters. They have strong administrative leadership, and they're instructionally effective for poor people that have a climate of expectation in which no children are permitted to fall below the minimum. So having high expectations. And then it continues on with these others. So you'll notice I did not read this whole article. I just went to the beginning of the summary to see if it was giving me something interesting. And it was. And so what I'm going to do now, effective schools for the urban poor, I'm going to come back to the summary part. And I'm going to open up a Word document. So let me just do that really quickly so I can take notes. So I'm going to pull this over here and fill up half the screen by just dragging and putting it in the side, and then I'll put this on the other side. And I'm going to take notes on the purpose of schools. In this article, my finding so far, and I'm just going to restate this in my own words, so I don't plagiarize, but I will give credit to this article. I'm going to say, good schools have good leadership, set high expectations for students, and let's add a couple more of these things. Let's see what else. The atmosphere is orderly without being rigid. They get that way partly by making it clear that pupil acquisition on the basic school skills take precedence over other school activities, and school energy and resources are diverted from other business, so they're focused, right? Basically, that's what we're saying here. I like how they say it in C, so let's just do this. The atmosphere is orderly without being rigid. So good schools have good leadership, set high expectations, and are orderly but not too rigid or strict. Now, I don't have to put a direct quote, like quotation marks on here, because this is not a direct quote. It's just a summarization. And remember, this was from the 70s, so I might say something like, historically, good schools have been viewed as those that have. All right, so now I've said it in my own words. I've summarized basically this whole article with only taking 30 seconds to read it. But now I need to put my inline citation. So I'm going to scroll back up to the top of this article just to see who the author or authors are. If it's just one, it's pretty easy. Now I'm going to do APA style here. If you're doing MLA, do it in the appropriate version. But I'll just do Edmonds and the year 1979. So that's easy for the inline citation. For the end of document, so I'll put all my references down here as I'm taking notes. References, see how I can spell? All right, for this, now I'm gonna go back to where I was in Google Scholar and find this thing that I just clicked on, which was by Edmonds. Now here's where this is cool, the citation button. If I click on this, I can take whatever citation standard I'm using. A lot of you in high school used MLA. In education, the standard's actually APA. So I'm just going to click that once and I'll automatically highlight the whole thing. Then I'll Control-C to copy it. I'll come to my Word document and Control-V to paste it. And I've got my citation. So it's really, really easy to take citations, have it properly formatted. I don't have to do any of that. I'm just looking up the article. So that's one of the things that's really, really nice about Google Scholar. Now, of course, the next step for me is I want to go back, let me make this full page, and look at some more recent articles on the purpose of schooling. So if I'm going to click since last year and look at the different purposes, I want to find a good research article here. So Awaken Schools, the Burning Imperative, nah, that's not connected closely with what I want. Access to the arts and education, the availability. So we might, if you're really interested in how to integrate art and music and dance and what that impact that has on your classroom, that might be good. Crypto growth, no. These are not turning out great results for me. Let me target or focus my search a little more. Purposes of schools. I'm just going to change that to function of schools. Function of schools in society. Sure, let's do that. All right, from here, teacher role as professional educator. That might be interesting. Let's look at it. We've only got 14 citations, but this just barely came out, so that's not too alarming. Oh, I think I opened it as a PDF down here. Let me open that PDF up. All right. Now, this is important because when we look at a research article, you might have been taught to read the whole thing front to back. And that's often not the case. Now, the first thing I'm going to notice is who are the authors and where are they from? Because often that determines, if this is isolated to a specific country, it looks like they're all Indonesian. So if their education in Indonesia is very different from ours, this might not be as useful. But just for an example, I'm going to go through this anyways. You'll notice it starts with an abstract. And most of the time, this is all you're going to need to read because this will tell you whether or not this article has something that will be useful to you in your research. So we can read the abstract. Teachers play an essential and strategic role in education. This is because the teacher is a component of education and the forefront of carrying out educational goals. Well, it looks like this might work for our purposes. So then I might read the introduction, but probably not because it's going to recap what I just read in the abstract. So I'm going to scroll down to the next section, which is research method and data collection. Sometimes they'll say methodology. I can skip all that because that just tells me how they set up their study. And even data analysis, that just tells me what they're doing to interpret their results. But really what I want to do is come to the end to where I have result and discussion. And before I even read that, I'm going to just scan through to see what sections I have. Role and position of teacher, teacher role at the school, and conclusions. Now, often I can skip all the discussion and go right to the conclusions because this will tell me in a more simple version what were their findings. Teachers are part of education and that has a very strategic role and mission. The role of the teacher at the school is determined by his status. Because of the position of the teacher, he is required to show his students' behavior following the society's expectations. Teachers play an essential role in both school and society. Now, that's actually something that I might take as a direct quote. That's really useful, but I can think of how to say that in my own words. The effectiveness and efficiency of individual learning is highly dependent on the role of teacher. So I'm going to summarize that by just saying teachers have a huge impact on student learning. So let me pull my document back up and just say teachers have a huge impact on student learning. And that is something, a claim that is made in this article. So I'm going to go ahead and cite, let me just come back to where I was here in Google Scholar. Hold on. Fill that side. All right. Which one was this? Teacher role. So I could say Dursa et al. So I'm going to Dursa et al. And then the year is 2022. You say et al. If it's 3 or more authors. If it's 2 authors, it would say Dursa, the and symbol, and the last name of the other author. But we've got Dursa et al. And then for my reference again, I'm just going to click on Cite, APA, copy, and come down here. D, A, B, C, D comes before E, so we'll alphabetize these. And then often what you might do at the end, if you want to format it the way they're traditionally formatted, is you take all your citations and then you just change the margins so the top one overlays like that. and then there's just a small indent. So you can do that after they're all alphabetized. Let's go ahead and make that a little bit bigger. And sorry, not used to doing this on half a screen. There we go. So I have a reference section. I've already found 2 claims, and that's really useful. Now, just to wrap up this video and this section on using Google Scholar, this is what we do to do the research. And then, of course, after we do the research, we take all our notes, and this is where your value comes in, is you tie all these notes together and start making claims and identifying themes about the purpose of schools and society. And so I'll do this research process. You see what we did just in the last 5 minutes gave me a good starting point. I can do a ton of research in a half hour to an hour, where I can scroll through probably 20 or 30 articles in an hour, find things that will be useful, and that's a great starting point for a research article. And then another hour or 2 to put my own ideas together, to tie together all these things. So I'm going to rearrange my notes and clump them together in themes and write my own ideas about those things and make it start to be coherent. And that's my first draft. So I can do research and writing, get a good first draft of 2 or 3 pages in an hour to 2. So it really doesn't have to take that long. Then you're going to ruminate on what you have, think through it, expand your ideas, and do editing, and that'll probably be another hour or 2. But for a 3 to 5 page paper, you can reasonably do that in 2 to 3 hours.
All right, thanks, Mike.